Hello and welcome. You're watching NewsX World. I'm Megha Sharma, and we are doing our special coverage of the United Nations General Assembly, the general debate that is taking place for the last 5 days. In fact, the 5th day of the United Nations General Assembly debate has finally begun. Leaders from the Bahamas, Mali and Jamaica are addressing the podium as the world awaits statements from other global leaders. Several breaking news developments are emerging that could influence the ongoing discussions at the Assembly. Joining me on the telecast is my colleague Thomas Porteous, who's giving us live updates as they happen. Thomas, what's the sense on the ground, especially in wake of the important leaders that are going to be speaking? Russia and India is what the world has set their eyes on.
Oh, well, yes, of course, Megha. A huge day for the UNGA. Russia, India, Saudi Arabia, among many others yet to speak today. Also Thailand and Cambodia, all set to take to that podium in front of the General Assembly. Now, the general feel is that this morning, smaller nations are to take to the podium. And so things are a little quiet around here. However, things are going to start gearing up into the mid-afternoon, which is about 9 o'clock IST, which is when the action really starts. Where, as you said, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov will be representing the Russian Federation. He will then be followed by Indian External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar to push India's message on the global stage.
Right, absolutely. Talking about what is it that is expected from Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister. We saw Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, who has spoken earlier in the week that has gone by at the UNGA. What is it that is going to be highlighted by Russia? How are they going to put up their argument, their end of the argument in continuing the war against Ukraine?
Well, of course, the Russians do not call it a war. They call it a special military operation. And for the last two United Nations General Assemblies, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has been the orator for Russia's war. He has called and cited Ukrainian Nazism, as he calls it, and has slammed Western protectionism and Western alliances like NATO, threatening the rest of the world. And so we can expect more of that from the Russian foreign minister. Of course, we've seen some sideline meetings here as well, with the Russian diplomat meeting with S. Jaishankar to talk about trade. Of course, India is facing a 25% extra tariff on the purchase of Russian oil. Donald Trump spoke about that at the very start of this week and slammed India and China for continuing to purchase Russian oil in aiding, as he says, Russia's war machine.
Right, absolutely. Do you also find it surprising that while there has been quite the momentum that has been built with regards to the Hamas-Israel war, the U.S. President Donald Trump himself had that meeting with the Muslim majority nations just a few days ago. There has been a meeting that has been held between France and Iran. Iran's President Pezeshkian. But there have been no meetings on the sidelines when it comes to the European Union countries and Ukraine, or for that matter, President Trump deciding to meet with the European nations.
Well, not at all. Of course, Donald Trump has been very vocal that he wants to see an end to the war in the Middle East, that is the Gaza war and Israel. Of course, we saw yesterday Benjamin Netanyahu take to that podium. Hundreds of delegates walk out from across the assembly. It was quite a scene. But Benjamin Netanyahu did not slow down on his rhetoric. He defiantly pushed Israel's and certainly his government's agenda of continuing this war, and says that it won't stop until Hamas is defeated, despite all the international criticism that has spanned this war, and particularly in that hall throughout this entire conference.
Right, absolutely. Talking about India and the much anticipated address that is going to be made by India's representative, External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar. Big focus on global fight against terrorism. That has been India's agenda, particularly after the attack, the terror attack that happened in Kashmir, in Pahalgam, and there was a strong, decisive response by way of military strikes by India on Pakistan. How does India move forward from here, getting support and momentum for its fight against terrorism? Because it's not just a subject that pertains, it's not just an issue or concern that pertains to India, but is an issue that the world is also grappling with.
Well, of course, Megha. At all the meetings, at all the sideline meetings, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has brought up and will continue to bring up the issue of terrorism and cross-border terrorism and continue to push that agenda. Of course, yesterday we saw these statements from Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif claiming that Pakistan won the war against India. We're unsure if S. Jaishankar is going to make a comment following that speech he heard yesterday. But of course, the huge stress here has been unilateralism and less protectionism, and that is what S. Jaishankar has repeated again and again in his meetings. It's about working together and maintaining that these institutions still hold weight, and that in times of that protectionism increases from the likes of Donald Trump, he does stress that these bodies and countries continue to work together to fight common enemies like terrorism.
Right, absolutely. Thomas, stay on with me. I'm also being joined by David. David, let's hear it from you as well. What is it that is expected on day 5 of the UNGA general debate?
A lot more debate. I mean, the UN, as it was set up under the rules in 1945 at the end of World War II, is not on these geopolitical and war matters able to do much because of the veto power of the big 5 countries. So the UN does great work on things like global pandemics, child welfare, things like that. But when it comes to these issues, the Gaza war, the invasion of Ukraine, and dealing with terrorism, it really is not by design going to do much more than be a place for various parties to present their positions.
Right. Absolutely. Of course, when we at this point in time also anticipate the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov was going to take the stage and going to make that very important address. What is the retort that is going to come from him? After Volodymyr Zelensky has already made that speech, he has warned the world of a global arms race that is going to be initiated by Russia unless it is stopped.
Well, because of the war in Ukraine, we've seen big change in the way I think we're going to see wars committed going forward. The idea of drone aircraft, which the U.S. was experimenting with more than 50 years ago, we're now seeing has been quite advanced. The Ukrainians are able now to build drones that can drop bombs or guided missiles long distances from where they are launched. That means presumably fewer deaths in field combat. It's going to change combined arms military attacks on the ground. But unfortunately, it's also going to lead to a lot of other countries adopting this kind of weaponry. And we're going to see, as things stand at the moment, more conflicts around the world because of issues including resources, especially water and fossil fuels.
Right. Also, let's take a look at what Donald Trump also said during his UNGA speech and also on the sidelines, that he I think in a rare comment has at this time said he supported Ukraine in gaining more territory from Russia. Because that's interesting, because up until now, before the UNGA general address that he made, he has always been advocating that Ukraine will have to let go of territory and let the status quo remain, that whatever territory has been taken over by Russia should remain with Russia. There is no way, there is no other way of resolving this conflict. So why this change of heart?
Well, Donald, whom I've known and covered for almost 40 years, is all about personal loyalty and embracing whatever it is he's saying at the moment. And often what he says is just stuff he makes up. And he promised voters in the United States last year that he would solve the war in Ukraine in one day, just one day. That was all it take. He'd have it solved in one day. That hasn't happened. He's been embarrassed because of that. Putin, when he was in Beijing, along with Prime Minister Modi, went out of his way to participate in a photo shoot with President Xi that was designed to embarrass Trump. He rode in President Xi's limousine, just as Putin did in Alaska with Trump. And so Donald, seeing that Vladimir Putin doesn't have any loyalty to him, I don't know why he ever thought he would have any loyalty to him, but seeing that it isn't there, he's now turning on him. And that's what Donald has done his whole life. Unless you have absolute, complete fidelity to Donald, he will turn on you. And that's what he's doing here. He doesn't know what to do to end this. I don't think he can get away with washing his hands of it and saying, I have no interest in this anymore. That would be an admission of failure on his part. And as best I know from all the years I've covered Donald, there's only one time in the public record he has ever said he made a mistake. One time.
Right. Also taking a look at India, there is going to be India's representative, the External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, who will be addressing the UNGA very shortly. We saw yesterday he had a bilateral meeting with his Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov. And more importantly, he has been in New York for the last 5 days, and he has been holding these meetings on the sidelines, whether it is about the G20 foreign ministers meeting, whether it is about the BRICS foreign ministers meeting. He's even had a G4 foreign ministers meeting, which included Germany and Japan and India. And also, you know, there was a fourth meeting that he held with the foreign ministers of IPSA, which is India, Brazil, and South Africa. There has been a momentum that has been built by India by way of the narrative that it portrays of a South-South development, a global South initiative. Do you think this is also going to be reflective in the comments that come hereafter?
Oh, I'm sure that we'll see those reflected in the comments that come before the UN. You know, India is in a very interesting position here. Russia is selling India oil at roughly a 20% discount to the world price. That's an enormous boon to India. At the same time, India is the single biggest supplier of diesel fuel, kerosene, to Ukraine, which it needs to maintain the war. And Trump is furious about this, and it's a good example of where diplomacy often is not simple. The world is not black and white. And so India is benefiting both sides and itself because of the economics of this. Sergei Lavrov right now is trying very hard to do everything he can to minimize the effect of sanctions by the United States, the EU, and the UK. That's why he's holding these meetings with other countries, because the Russian economy is in very bad shape. On the other hand, the Russian people are used to privation and have a long history of putting up with an enormous amount of privation because of government policies. So sanctions that might be highly effective if applied, say, to Australia or Canada, don't have the same effect on the Russian populace. And of course, Russia is now a de facto dictatorship.
Do you think that at this point of time, clamor that is growing, it's not just, you know, when India goes said that, you know, our oil purchases are dependent on India's economy, what is best for the country. I think China has also expressed the same sentiment. And now we saw just a day ago, the head of the government of Hungary, Orbán Viktor, communicating the same to Donald Trump, saying that, you know, if I stop buying oil and gas from Russia, my economy will completely, you know, immolate. It's going to completely be destroyed, and he cannot, you know, stop buying oil at the cost of his country's welfare, his countrymen's development. Do you think that is a sufficient, good enough reason for countries to look after their interests, irrespective of the war that is playing out in Eastern Europe?
I mean, we should assume that all countries act in their own best interests. You know, during World War II, the United States and Nazi Germany actually engaged in some trade of certain kinds of metals and other materials that one side had and both sides needed. They were run through the Swiss and other intermediaries. So let's keep in mind that even in the watershed event of human history, World War II, the belligerents had some commerce with one another. So, of course, President Xi in China and the dictator Viktor Orban in Hungary are going to say, we're going to buy Russian oil, especially because they can get it at deeply discounted prices, and it's in their interest to do so. There are lots of other pressure points that can be brought to bear on Russia. The problem is that neither Donald Trump nor most of the team around him are competent to come up with and enforce the kind of additional sanctions to what we already have. I mean, many of the sanctions we have been very damaging to Russia, and Vladimir Putin has basically said, yeah, so what? I'm going to pursue this war. I believe Ukraine should be part of Russia, never mind the treaty that the Kremlin signed in 1994 with Ukraine and the United States. I'm going to ignore that. And of course, people should know that as a matter of international law, treaties don't follow leaders, they follow nations.
Right, absolutely. Talking also about what happened yesterday, the UNSC vote that went ahead and sanctioned Iran for developing and enriching its uranium and building nuclear weapons. You know, while there was France and a couple of countries from Europe that continued to support and even consider the option of delaying these United Nations sanctions, which was also a proposition that had been made by Russia and China. United States was steadfast in its demand to impose those UN sanctions. There, of course, has been retaliation from Iran. Where do you see, and do you see this issue being resolved in the short term?
Well, let's keep in mind that we had an agreement, Western countries had an agreement with Iran that was going to slow dramatically any capacity for it to build nuclear weapons. The religious leaders had not given the necessary religious approval to build nuclear weapons, though they were clearly enriching uranium. And Donald Trump stepped in and blew up that agreement. That's a crucial element in this. He destroyed that agreement. And what was the message to the Iranians? Hey, get ready, build all the nuclear material you can, put it even deeper underground so that if the U.S. were to drop on you, as it just did a few months ago, bunker buster bombs, you can continue your effort to develop enriched uranium that can be used to make bombs. So this issue is going to be more troublesome entirely because in his first term, Donald Trump blew up an agreement, and that goes to his just appalling ignorance of how the world works, what motivates other people. Donald, in this fictional world he creates in his own head, just believes everybody does whatever he tells them to do, and that's how the world works.
You know, another issue that has grabbed global headlines is, of course, about the Gaza conflict. There was the Palestinian leader, the president, who was not allowed in America. There were sanctions that were imposed on him. He had to make a video conference while at the UNGA, the speech that he made. We also saw yesterday Benjamin Netanyahu making a very impassioned speech defending Israel for its fight against terrorism and its war against Hamas. Of course, US president at this point of time has said that it will not allow for Israel to annex West Bank. But do you think things can move forward in terms of any lasting resolution, especially when it comes to the release of the hostages? And in exchange, Israel is committed, as the Israeli prime minister said yesterday, that it will end the war if the hostages are released.
If you believe that, I have a bridge to sell you in Brooklyn. I don't think that that will end it. And, Hamas, whose leadership doesn't even live in Gaza, has no incentive or reason to bring about an end to this, even as Israel is systematically destroying Gaza, where the death toll is completely out of proportion to the horrific and inexcusable events of October 7th. The inability of the world's countries to bring about together some resolution 48 years after the Nakba says that this is just going to go on and on and on. There's actually a little joke in the United States about how long people in the Middle East harbor resentments, and it has to do with, we have to go and kill these people. Oh, why? Well, because in 1368, meaning that these are disputes that have no basis except for some historical belief, and there's no indication whatsoever that there's going to be a resolution of this. The other countries in the Middle East do not want to take more Palestinians. The Palestinians want to control their own territory. The U.S. is no longer proposing there must be a two-state solution. And Netanyahu, who has been full of animus toward Palestinians since he could barely shave. There are videos of him from when he was a very young man expressing his animus to Palestinians. He now is in a position where he can pursue his hatred of Palestinians, and he's doing it full force, even though a lot of Israelis are turning out in the streets every now and then, huge demonstrations to protest what he's doing. And in America, large segments of the Jewish population are absolutely appalled by what Netanyahu is doing.
All right, thank you, David Johnston, for joining me on the telecast and sharing your views. We'll keep a close eye on all these big developments coming in from the United Nations General Assembly. The general debate is now in progress. Important leaders are going to be speaking today. So stay tuned on NewsX World. Thanks for watching.